get to kick everything off. I think you can probably hear me. For those who don't know, Bill Fiander with Planning Director for the city. I just wanted to go around, since we don't have a huge audience today, let's just make sure we know everybody here and introduce ourselves and who we're with. Start up the front here. Doug.
Good morning, Doug Gerber, Deputy City Manager.
Brandon Kauffmann, Director of Finance.
Doug.
Mike Hall, current planning manager.
Tom Block, Shawnee County Public Works and Solid Waste.
Mike Morris, KS Commercial Real Estate.
Steve Lacoste from Department of West Engineers.
Tim Richard, Topeka Capital Journal. Dan Warner in the planning office.
Allie Van Dyke, Committee of Media Relations for the city. Sasha Stiles, City of Topeka Neighborhood Relations.
I'm Pam Solis, Westar Energy.
I'm Kevin Beck of Schmidt Beck and Boyd Engineering.
Rick Schmidt, Schmidt Beck and Boyd Engineering.
Sean Brunn, City Engineer.
All right, well, thank you. We have an agenda. When you came in, the primary focus of the agenda today is going to be talking first about special assessment district policy. And that's why Brandon and Doug are up here to start off. And we had a meeting a couple months ago that we got a lot of good feedback on, and that's what the policy, a lot of that is based on. And if we have some time, we'll dip into some other issues that we have on the agenda and anything you want to discuss as well. So we'll try to get out of here by an hour time or less. So unless there's any questions, Brandon, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I think when the email that went out, we sent out a draft of the policy and then also kind of a summary of that. So I'm under the assumption that some of you have read the policy. So really, I just want to concentrate on some of the highlights of the policy.
Kevin, you haven't read the policy? Is that what you're laughing at?
So I'm just going to go through some of the highlights of the policy, and then really this is another opportunity to get feedback. So I'd say that a lot of the policy was developed based on feedback that we received from the last developer meeting that we had, that we talked about special assessment policy. And at that time, there were a number of people here that gave numerous comments and feedback about how they'd like to see things develop. So really, we took that information, crafted it, looked at what other cities were doing across the state, and then brought that together in this draft. So really, the focus of the policy is a prudent use of special assessments that promotes orderly development and that also pays for itself. So that's kind of the three core areas of where we're aiming at in developing this policy. So I'll start just with the highlights here. So Section A talks about the scope of the policy. So the scope's intended to go towards new residential developments. It's not intended for any type of smaller developments. So I know we have a lot of individual type improvement districts that may come forth in the city, such like if one residence owner wanted to be added to the sewer system. The policy is not aimed at that. It's really aimed at bigger, larger developments. Also, we were looking at creating a benefit district committee to review any applications that came in, petitions for special assessment districts. That committee would be comprised of the city manager or his appointee, director of finance, planning director, public works director, director of neighborhood relations, and the city engineer. And that committee's core purpose is really to make a recommendation to the governing body on a petition district. So that's never a stopping point. The committee is only reviewing it to make recommendations, and in the end, the governing body will always continue to be the final arbitrator of any decisions for special assessment improvement districts. Another highlight of the area in Section J, we talked about financial due diligence. So that committee would be the committee of oversight, basically for looking at the financials of the project and making a recommendation to the governing body based upon those. So some of the things that they'd look at is to make sure that there are no outstanding tax obligations by the developer. Developers would be required to provide financial statements with documentation of ownership of land, and to us, that was one of the things that came out of the last meeting, that developers would be willing to do that, share that information with us, and really give us some background on their finances in order to make sure that we're partnering with a good partner financially. Special assessments would be certified within a market range. So in the policy, we asked that the developer work with us, they would bring a realtor to the table who would certify that those prices for the special assessments were basically within the market that would be allowed to make it marketable to individuals in the community. And then also a cost benefit analysis that would be conducted by the admin and financial services department. So that's kind of the due diligence. I might stop there and ask if there's any feedback or thoughts on that.
Is $100,000 minimum a hard number?
So we were trying to think of a number that we could put in the policy. So
For like a sanitary sewer project for a 20-lot subdivision, you could be under that number.
okay, but from a conceptual point, once you add in streets on that,
No, that would be more, that would be
Yeah.
a separate district.
yeah, that's true. Okay,
I think nothing realistic could be built for under 50,
50.
but
Okay.
there are some $90,000 sewer projects for some of the smaller developers.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. So another thing that we discussed at the meeting was financial sureties for projects. And one thing that we heard was that we didn't want to be any stringent than the county's policy. So basically this part mirrors the county in that you can put down 30% for a letter of credit or a surety bond, or 20% for cash, cashier's check, or escrow accounts. Then those would be released after certain conditions have been met, either based on occupancy of permits or based on the valuation of the properties. So to me, that financial surety is kind of, that's the collateral that we're looking at, and in addition to doing financial reviews. So if anybody went to a bank, typically you're going to have to provide your financial information, you're going to have collateral, and you're going to have to make some type of down payment. So really to us, these financial sureties are some of that collateral. And then another thing that we heard was phasing in lots, or phasing in development, so that we don't have a glut of lots come on the market at any one time. And I think a lot of that was associated with the Lawrence Bay development, bringing 178 lots on the market at one time. So, we've still got maybe 175 lots out there. And so we've got about 2 years worth of lots just in one development out there. So the phasing in of lots was really a response to that. So we looked at a max amount of 45 lots per development. And then that we can additionally continue to monitor the market to make sure that there's not an oversupply of lots coming onto the market at any one time. And then in addition to that, we wanted to support infill and redevelopment, as has already been identified in the land use and growth management plan. So that was another element of the policy. So that kind of goes over the section 1 highlights. I'll stop there and then ask for any thoughts, feedback. Anybody have any concerns with the maximum amount of lots of 45 to be phased in at any one time? Section 2. So Section 2 really covers the financing of certain types of improvements. So A, that basically says the city would allow for street improvements. B, the city would not allow for internal water line improvements within residential subdivision. And then C, the city would allow for sewer improvements within residential subdivision. So this is kind of the other piece that I talked about. You know, if you go to the bank, collateral, down payment, financial information. So to us, this is part of the down payment of making that water payment in advance. Is something that we've heard also at the previous meeting that developers were willing. I think it was a former city policy that internal water improvement lines were paid for by the developer. So it's kind of going back to mirror that policy from the past. But those are really the highlights of the special assessment policy in its draft form now. We'll be taking it to council, I believe in October, mid-October, to have a discussion with them, to get their input, feedback, and then from there possibly taking a resolution back to them with, for them to consider approval. So that's kind of the process that we're looking at, and would appreciate any feedback from you all. If there's anything you see in here that you don't like, or
how do you calculate or how do you determine that special assessments are within the market range? Is it a percentage of the anticipated mortgage, or?
You know, something like that. I think we'd really like to rely on a realtor within the community that knows the market. I think we have a general idea for what an allowable market range is, but we didn't want to set anything in the policy just due to things change over time.
It would probably also vary by type of lot and location, so there's so many factors we didn't want to stick it into the policy.
Yeah. We've seen some policies, you know, where they have a range of basically dollar on housing improvements. So maybe you get up into the $1 million range and you're pushing maybe $500 a month or something like that. Whereas maybe a $200,000 house, maybe you're at $150 to $200 a month. So we didn't want to stick anything in the policy, but really rely on the realtor and development community to tell us what the true market range is.
Any other comments, questions on the policy? Brandon's contact information is on the agenda. If you think of anything or want to send him any further notes that you see, we appreciate it. We still have some time. So, okay. Thank you, guys. So we can get into a couple other items here that we can walk through and see if we can answer any questions, get any feedback. The first one on our other to-do list talks about sidewalk policies, and I didn't really have anything prepared. I did that went out in the email to the group. What's right now, the City of Topeka and the MTPO are developing a pedestrian master plan. One of the issues to make the city more walkable, the community more walkable, one of the issues that have come up is sort of the timing of when sidewalks are put in with new development. So it kind of piggybacks a little bit on what Brandon was talking about with new residential development. And in the past, the policy would be to put the sidewalk in with the home when the home is constructed. What has happened is, obviously, we also have a complete streets policy, and if not all the homes get put in a certain subdivision, then you have incomplete sidewalk network and an incomplete street. So what we're looking at we're trying to look at ways so that we can ensure a complete street network, a complete street network with sidewalks as part of that. So one of the options and we've been looking at other cities as well, as to require the sidewalk to be put in with the benefit district, with the street district. The streets are put in. This has, there's several points of why that obviously could work with a complete street network, but we've also know that we've heard in the past that those sidewalks can get broken up during construction. They're certainly going to be cut into for driveways and whatnot. So we wanted to kind of test the waters, get that out there, and see what any input we could get on that. It's also been suggested that and some cities do this, is they require a thicker sidewalk to prevent some of that breaking up, if you will. Seeing how we're kind of piggybacking on the assessment district idea, any thoughts on including sidewalks with the streets in the future? Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe Sean, since
Sure.
I looked, I forgot you. For those who've been here a long time, did we not used to do that?
My understanding is years ago, and it's been quite a few, like 20 plus years ago, that we did install sidewalks with the streets. And the concerns that you mentioned about not knowing the location of the driveway and the damage during construction were reasons that it was allowed to delay until the lots developed.
So at some points in the last 15 years or so, I would say that policy changed. In checking with other cities, Mike did some research, and we found a handful that do require it up front. We have found a handful that require it, and the home goes in. I think it's probably a good time to look at that policy, because we do have a little different market and economy now, where we probably wouldn't expect full subdivisions to get built out as quickly as they have been.
I guess I have mixed feelings on this. I can see both sides of the story. It would be great to have all the sidewalks built at the same time, because then when people move in, they have the full sidewalk in their development. But I do get it that there is a cost, which would likely be passed on to the next homeowner of the empty lot, that the contractor would just charge them to tear out the existing sidewalk and put it back in place. But I've also seen where we've got sidewalks where I live that have been left a gap for decades, and they're still not there. So I would err on maybe say, all right, we'll give you a 2-year window or something. And if it is not in, then you're coming in, and maybe you have to, maybe the developer or someone has to put in a little fund that's going to pay for those sidewalks. And after 2 years, if they're not in place, then they get put in place or something like that, because to me it's inevitable that not every lot will necessarily get sold, and you'll have a gap, and no one will want to put the sidewalk in. And I think as a homeowner in a subdivision, I think it should be expected that you have a sidewalk.
Good thought. Yeah, we want to, so we want them to be in. If you don't have them in to begin with, then it comes back to how do you enforce that provision. And in the past, we haven't had a way to do that. So we'd have to look into how that would get ultimately.
I kind of think it's similar to something like park set-aside funds. Don't developers have to put so much aside for park development in a development? Maybe something similar to that for sidewalk development.
They do. The one, obviously we're creating a vehicle, potential vehicle to say after the end of is there a timing when they get the letter of credit back as to how many lots are complete in a subdivision, or a time?
I think it's based on how many occupancy permits.
Curb cut set on
understand where the question coming, bumping across the curb all the time, or the sidewalk being in the middle of the driveway, not knowing where the driveways are. Is that, the driveways are not set at the time of, I don't know residential, as you can tell.
Correct. Yeah, they're gonna have to bring that up to the driveway in. Ramps are put in with the street, correct?
Correct.
The ADA ramps, those are put in.
I think it's a big enough cost that it will be difficult to come up with projected specials that someone would certify are in line with other specials, because I can see this around $1,500 a lot. And we're looking at specials at around $25,000 a lot for a street project. $1,500 is a significant cost. But perhaps it can be tied to the surety release. Have to have them walk in before the surety release or something like that. I've also heard from home builders that they pay significantly less for sidewalks with their home building crews and their concrete crews than the crews that build the streets, around half as much for the same sidewalk.
Yeah, it's one of the things I think we want to understand as well is what is, before we move too much further, is what is the costs, typical type of costs that we're talking about, and whether that has any relation to making this less marketable assessment fee or not. So the timing, giving so much time to the town put in, it sounds like there's the letter of credit, the surety would be released after a 30%, basically the occupancy of the development. Whether or not we would want to hold off on that until the sidewalks are then, the remainder of the sidewalks are put in, that could be, we can look at that as well. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Steve?
Yeah, be tied to the release.
Yeah. Any further thoughts, but there are several conditions of releasing the credit, obviously, being timed with your payments. But having the improvements are already accepted, the street improvements are already accepted at the beginning by the city, correct, Sean?
At the end of the construction, yes.
At the end of the construction of the street, for instance. So as the homes are getting built, we're assuming it's already acceptable. Okay. Any other thoughts? We'll work through some options on that and come back with that more refined. And then a couple other things. I have down here development services update, and I know Sasha's in the back. Richard Faulkner couldn't be here today to give his update. And one of the updates was why he can't be here. City is transitioning from a 2006 International Building Code to a 2015. So they're in training as we speak. I don't know how many that affects of you, but that's to be forthcoming here. They'll be taking that to the governing body here when they wrap that up. And so any questions about that could be directed towards Richard. The other update I was just going to make that he wanted me to make was we had a focus group this summer, development community focus group, and one of the things we keep hearing is a more timely review of from a trade aspect, some inspections, and on the building side of things. So the city had already budgeted for an extra mechanical inspector for 2016, and I believe we are accelerating that and moving that forward to this year to help with a lot of the redundancy in the trades. There wasn't, and so that there's not as much waiting going on when it gets to the point where we want to get a building open or reviewed plans. It can come back a little more quicker. So Sasha, do you have anything else on development services side of things? I know there's a lot going on, but I didn't want to.
The only thing I would add is that Richard will be meeting with the contractors next week at a discussion forum to talk about our inspection and certificate of occupancy processes. So we could have some stuff come out of that results in change of the way we're doing things, but we'll see next week. So if you all are interested in that discussion, please feel free to come.
Yeah, again, Richard's contact is on there, and that we had our focus group this summer, kind of the first two steps of the whole building stage, the planning stage, and then the building permit stage. His focus group is going to be on that last stage, is getting into the building, inspecting it, and doing certificates of occupancy. All right, so the last thing that I wanted to bring up was on another thing that came out of that focus group was trying to move up our site plan review in the whole process right now for commercial projects. I believe anything 4 units or above, so multiple family, commercial, industrial, office, institutional, any of those types of new construction, when they come in, we review a site plan with the building permit. The recommendation was to take that site plan that you reviewed during the building permit and move it in front of the building permit, so that's more of a planning review. So you have a I would say 20 to 30% design of the development, and we want to. There are some things that you don't want to be surprised at when you're at 80-90% down the road, which is when you're already into getting your plans reviewed. So we want to review the site earlier, and that will help prevent surprises and conflicts between both parties, city, other reviewing agencies, and the developer, of course. So we've started to roll that out more on a kind of a pilot basis. mghall, here, our current planning manager, is kind of the point person for helping us do that, but that involves a lot of other folks, a lot of other teamwork, not to the least to mention the stormwater. Stormwater is a big part of this, is when you lay out a site, lay out your plans for the site, you need to take that into consideration. So we're trying to get earlier review on the stormwater to go with the site plan, so we can get a look at the parking, the circulation, pedestrian, landscaping areas, stormwater. Those are sort of the main things I think we're trying to look at up front. So Mike, any other comment on that, or you want to make?
Just, there's kind of a threshold at which something should be done early. An early site plan review is required or highly recommended. And that threshold is, it's based on what's in the ordinance, the site plan ordinance and the landscape ordinance. And if there's an addition to an existing development of 15,000 square feet or more, or 50% or more increase in gross floor area of the building, or also a significant increase in the parking lot or new construction, any of those types of projects would require an early site plan review application. If they don't meet that threshold, then it's not something that's taking a formal application early. We encourage you to talk to us early and have pre-application meetings with us. And if you want us to review something early, we'll certainly do it. But there is kind of a threshold, so this doesn't apply to every project out there. It's the larger projects.
Yeah, so hopefully we're not creating another, we're planning better. We're not creating hopefully an extra step in the process. We're just moving that step earlier in the process. So your building permit review process can go much more predictable without as many conflicts from the site stage. So anyway, so thank you. Mike's contact information is on there as well if you have any thoughts on that. But we're going to catch a lot of these with the pre-app meetings. So any significant projects that come along, we're going to have pre-app meetings, and we'll make everybody aware of that up front. Okay, I don't have anything else. I had one other thought on under the other, Pam Solis from Westar, do you want to just touch on the change in the underground subsidy, or whatever it's called, for utilities?
With our current rate hearing that will be finalized, I believe, first part of November, the amount that Westar will contribute to a subdivision increased from $30,000 to $40,000. And so that allows that developer a little bit more leeway on what costs they're going to have in the project. So the changes in regards to the payout or the payback per lot, I don't believe has changed, but the amount, that initial amount that we will contribute to a development did increase. So that's a residential development.
So it's currently, code and policy has all new developments, residential subdivisions, for example, undergrounding utilities. There's obviously a cost to do that, and Westar helps with some upfront, that's what we're talking about, some upfront funding to get that going. It may not cover everything, but eventually whatever the developer has to cover, then Westar does reimburse or...
Reimburse
Yeah.
after a certain amount of lots over a certain time period, yes.
Yeah. So I think that was actually good news, because it hasn't been changed for a while, has it?
No, it hadn't.
It's kind of, okay, thanks, Pam. Is there anything else, any other issues, questions to come up now or in the future? If not, we're all free to go to lunch. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it, everybody.